Hi there, and welcome on the journey to transform culture. I'm Steve, and I'll be your guide. Well, folks, hope you're having a fantastic day and an even better week. In this video, we're going to jump into talking about kindness, right? Kindness. Now, if you're just cracking this video open and you're feeling a little grumpy, then you may not be thinking very kind thoughts right now, right? But so let's jump in from that perspective, right? Individually, us as individuals, right? We might we might in our mind go, I think kindness is where is the road I want to stay on, right? But I think mostly because we want people to be kind to us, right? I can tell you, I have suffered from large quantities of where kindness was lacking in my lifetime. And I'm certain that that has been true for many of you. Okay. And I think that also drives home the whole notion of why it's important to be kind. It's a little golden rule-ish, right? It's kind of like, hey, if you want kindness, then you have to demonstrate some kindness, right? I know uh, my mom, was a big, obviously you would hope, right? Your mom. But kindness was an important ingredient, right? She didn't say I had to be the smartest kid in school, this, all the things, right? But she did stress, kindness and and would invalidate, say verify validation like QA person, but she would kind of back up and say, well, when that happened, were you kind? It was an important quality, right? Kindness. And have I been kind my entire life? Oh, I'm certain I haven't been. I'm even in my book, I talk about how, and which is my weak thing was driving because I would be, you know, get a little sideways when people would cut me off in traffic and all the, silly things, right? And in fact, I use the word silly on purpose so that I can deflate the whole edge of what would go on so that it would be easier for me to be kind about the situation. But it really is about understanding, what's going on around you and what's at play in other people's lives. I remember, I don't know if you've ever done this, but there's the whole, it's a little pay it forward type of scenario where uh, would go through the McDonald's or whatever to get a little snack or something. I say little snack. Does everybody say that? I don't go to fast food anymore, but but to get a little snack, yeah, sure, Steve, a little snack. To get a little snack, and when I was doing this, I was like, I think I'm going to pay for the food for the people behind me, right? And I actually saw in my rearview mirror it was a couple, not a bus of 50, and I gotta, I'm not cheap, but come on now, be realistic. And anyway, so I was going to do this, right? But what I noticed is that they were kind of in a tiff. It was a guy and a gal, and they were, I don't know, they were probably in their early 30s ish, it appeared. And they were and they weren't battling it out, but you could tell there was some heated debate going on, some discussion. I'll call it that to be nice, right? To be kind. And so I thought, well, this would be great. I'll get my food, I'll pull forward. I would just always kind of pull forward a little bit, get my straw and my cup, just kind of get organized. At the time, I had a little Mazda Speed 3 with a stick. So you can't really eat fast food and drive a stick, right? So there's a little planning required there. Anyway, so I'd pull forward, do that. Anyway, so I pull forward and look through my rearview mirror, as I'm doing this, and of course, you can tell, oh, blah blah blah, pay for your food, whatever, and and the look on how it just settled their energy right down, just calm down, right? Because, and of course, I found that very amusing. And before, just as they looked forward, I thought, oh crap, I need to go, right? This isn't about me. This is really about, but I wanted to observe it because I just wanted to get a little joy out of the whole thing, right? So I scooted on out of there. But anyway, But that's the power of kindness, right? There's a power. There's obviously the power of love, and there's so many things about us humans that is powerful. But kindness is powerful, right? Even to be truthful, right? And I don't mean you're being truthful just to be kind. I guess what I'm saying is you can be kind, you can be direct and kind, right? You can give people latitude, right? You got to give people a little room to fail, right? A little wiggle room, right? Don't just set people up so that then you can turn around, because it isn't always in your manner and what you say specifically. You could set somebody up to, a gotcha in a conversation, or, just silly things. And those aren't kind things, right? Those aren't collaborative modes. Being unkind and going at things in a kind of a very nefarious or a passive aggressive way. Definitely not kind, right? And some people aren't attuned to it. So when they receive that lack of kindness, you're more apt, if you're not kind, to pass that along, and then that multiplies. So that lack of kindness is just as contagious as kindness could be. Okay, so it's a power, and that power can reset folks. It can reset. It can kind of bring their energy into focus. Get them back on the middle path so they're not out in the weeds, right? And and keep them on track and calm the waters, so to speak, right? It could be gentle kindness, but it could also be, there's so many ways to flavor kindness, right? It could be that bubbly, hopeful and whatever, I guess it depends on the day and the person, right? But how it's packaged. How do you package? Ask yourself, how do you package kindness? Not that you got to package it, but I mean, how does it emanate from you and how you deal with other people, right? If you're dealing with customers, which are pretty much everybody in our lives, right? If you're dealing with everybody in your life, how does kindness, how does it come across? Sometimes kindness is knowing somebody is off track, right? Now this is, there's this could is a little warbly. I will give you that. But I have found that if somebody is off track, and if you're boom quick to correct them, they're more apt to be defensive and or dig into something that is maybe a little inaccurate or maybe a flawed argument. Nothing bad, not lying, right? But they don't have all the facts, right? If I came at you with, well, I don't think you have all the facts, that may be true, but it may be a little bit abrupt if I'm just coming at you with that, right? How you package it now becomes, well, I've dug a little bit deeper, I feel, and this is what I discovered because I think I was probably a lot like you. And then so I looked this, and this. Sometimes kindness can be explaining that you've done some other due diligence to arrive at either a different conclusion and or an open ended. I'm not certain about that, right? And this other information leaves enough uncertainty that I don't think I can pin that down to that, being actually the correct, mode or situation, whatever, right? So there's ways to do it, right? It's not just being happy and joyful and being a clown, okay? We're not talking about being clowny and false and fake and all that stuff. We're talking about a genuineness, right? A heartfelt, love centered kindness toward people and toward the efforts, right? And this is the other thing, too, folks. You can be kind as you want it and professional, right? Obviously, these should go hand in hand, right? But kind and professional with your team and so on. But you could be stirred up, to level 9 about a functional situation, and it's always best if we include ourselves in this situation. Well, we just can't let this happen again, right, folks? So let's come up with a solution, right? I wasn't unkind to anybody in that my fake example here, right? I'm talking about the situation. Now I'm talking about something that maybe a machine got away or whatever, not calling a person out, that's not kind. Okay. And and so, you know, focusing on, okay, well, what can we do to guard against this happening in the future? Because remember, we don't want to shut people down. We want people to be open enough to be honest about what's going on, and other people may say, hey, this, and that occurred, and because maybe something genuinely got away from somebody, and all those sorts of things do happen, right? It's like, hey, you know what? It can happen. So let's just figure out a way to lock this down so that we're on track, going forward. And then just roll right on. Pump up your team and let's rock and roll this thing, right? We don't start throwing people off the boat, just because the ship's about a half degree off, for a minute or two, right? We're human beings. We have to give ourselves a little room to fail, right? Not tons. We don't want failure galore, but you got to give people a little latitude because they won't grow if they don't have a little room. Okay. And they'll be too scared to make a decision. They'll be too, all these things. So lack of kindness can what? Intimidate folks. Where kindness opens things up, right? Kindness is opened up, right? Lack of kindness is closed off, right? So keep that in mind. Being kind is an important, it's a superpower, right? It's an important superpower that you have, right? How do you use your kindness? How does it come across with your team? If you're a team member, how does it come across with your peers? And then when you're dealing with customers and so on, right? Don't limit this. All the dots connect, folks. Whatever we do on our teams in an organizational setting translates out into the broader culture. Are you kind? Do you have limits to where your kindness can go? Well, I don't like this and this group and that group and da 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 da. When you start to make exceptions where kindness is concerned, then that means that you will, make exceptions at any, place in the chain of human connectivity, right? And if you give yourself permission to be unkind, right, to anyone, then you're essentially opening yourself up to being unkind to everyone, right? And you probably are not going to receive kindness back, right? Because you can have a reputation of being unkind. So, on that note, and then let me address this too. There may be something that somebody perceives as unkind. If you make a mistake and said something, oddball thing that was said, somebody mistook a thing as an unkindness. This is where joking around has got so much scrutiny, right? Because what? Some joking was because it's at somebody else's expense. Okay, fine. But if it's my best friend and and we kind of mess with each other, right? And we know there's a threshold that works. That's okay. But it does that same thing isn't going to work, with somebody I don't know, right? Out going to the grocery store, right? So, understand where you are, understand the setting, understand your environment, read the room a little bit, right? We're not perfect at this, but do our best. And that's another way to demonstrate kindness. I could go on and on about kindness, but I'm going to be kind and keep this video short. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Remember, hit that good green domino 3 to 5 times a day or more to uplift, motivate, inspire, just encourage one another. When we do this, not only helping to transform culture, but we're transforming our own lives. But don't forget, we can't transform anything on the outside if we're not willing to transform on the inside. It's so important. All right, folks, have a fantastic day. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.